Sorry, it's recording. Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today I'll be hosting Eric.
Hi, I'm
Welcome
back.
back for a second week, 2 weeks in a row. So, for start off the video today, we're not going to be doing our flex options like we had last week. This week, we both picked a quarterback in the top 12 that I wouldn't say is unstartable, but I would say that it's not a good matchup for him, and we have a better player further down that has a better matchup this week than the top 12 player.
Yeah. So, what we did is we looked at the expert consensus rankings, and we took, the guys that we thought were a little too high and the guys that we thought were a little too low on that.
Yes. You want to go first or want me to go first?
Why don't you start?
All right. So I picked Josh Allen. He's going up against the Patriots this week. And Jimmy Garoppolo didn't do too well last week. And Bill Belichick always is like the best guy at taking away your best weapon. And so I think that Josh Allen is the Bills' best weapon. And last year against the Patriots, he completed under 50% of his passes. And also, he only threw 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in 2 games and got sacked 8 times. So it's not a very good matchup for Josh Allen this week. And I think most people know that, and they're probably still going to play him. But the guy I would say that I would play ahead of him if I was picking would be Derek Carr. Derek Carr is outside the top 12. Derek Carr has completed a career high passes 72%. Also, his last 2 games are going against very tough opponents, Tampa Bay and Kansas City. And in those games, he threw for over 347 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's got the Browns this week, who just gave up 400 yards passing to Joe Burrow. And Derek Carr, he's looked good this year. And I would play him over Josh Allen if it's me, just from the matchup.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Well, and also, honestly, so I actually, and I don't know if this will come up later or not, but I have Josh Allen ranked 6th this week, and so I've talked to Ben about this plenty, but so I'm not a believer in New England's defense, but I do get, like, he has not looked the same as he did early in the season, and I think that, there's definitely a chance that he's going to struggle. Whereas Derek Carr,
3 bad weeks in a row too.
Right. No, yeah, he has. And Derek Carr has not been, or Derek Carr has an amazing matchup. And so realistically, putting him up there, I think that makes sense. Derek Carr is probably the one player that's not in the top 12 that definitely needs to be, I would say. Well, other than, my guy too, I'm thinking. But yeah, so for me, looking at the top 12 QB1s this week, the guy that I would honestly fade is Lamar Jackson, which is probably super controversial. So feel free to tell me in the comments below. But yeah, Lamar Jackson has been terrible. Just going to say it. His stats, hold on. Rewind a second. Fantasy-wise, Lamar Jackson has been terrible. And so, he's still a fine quarterback. I mean, the Ravens are like literally the hardest team to beat pretty much in the NFL. But yeah, he just has not been a great fantasy player. And I think that when he's going against possibly one of the best defenses, definitely the best pass rushing defense in the NFL, on top of that, one of the best pass protection defenses in the NFL, I just don't see this being a good matchup for Lamar Jackson. And I think it's interesting too, because the Ravens and Pittsburgh is just like, I think, a negative matchup on both sides of the ball. But I really think that Ben Roethlisberger is going to be who he is, and because he's been in the league long enough. Lamar Jackson is still a young quarterback, and I just don't see. I think the more that Pittsburgh rushes him, he's going to start doing his thing, running outside of the pocket, and he's going to lose a ton of fantasy ceiling from not passing the ball. And so, doing it with your legs is going to get you points, but I just don't see this being a positive matchup for him. And I think having him as high as he is just ridiculous. So he's definitely, and someone that I would, and I don't want to say that I would start this player over Lamar necessarily, but someone that I would really can take a look at and consider starting over Lamar is Baker Mayfield. Baker plays Tennessee this week, or not Tennessee. Baker plays the Raiders this week. and the Raiders have a terrible pass defense. And I think that is going to be a really high-scoring game, and it's very similar to what Ben was just talking about with Derek Carr on the other side, because Cleveland does not have a good pass defense, and the Raiders do not have a good pass defense. And most of the games the Raiders have played this year have been pretty high-scoring, especially against teams that have had good offenses, which Cleveland does. And so I think that definitely Cleveland runs a ton, and that's not going to change in this game because the Raiders also have a very poor run defense. They're just a bad defense all around. But yeah, I think that's going to happen, and I think that Baker is a really strong look. And also, he played really well last week. He looked like the same guy back in his rookie season that everyone thought he would be, and I think it's good. I think it might hurt a little bit with Odell being out, but also that does open the floor for some other guys to step up. And I foresee Baker having a good game. So that's just a player that I'd consider putting over Lamar.
That was good. I might consider it. I don't have Lamar.
Yeah, you don't own Lamar in any leagues.
I did last year. So we're going to do running backs now. And we basically did the same thing except we did top 24 because 2 starting running backs. And then we're going to do outside of the top 24. So mine in the top 24, I did Dave Montgomery. Dave Montgomery's playing against the Saints defense, which they've been really good against the run this year. And David Montgomery had 48 rushing yards last week against the Rams. And the week before that, he had 58 rushing yards, which he's been under 60 in almost every single game this year. And in the last 5 games against the Rams, where am I? Oh, in the last 5 games, he averaged under 3.4 yards per carry, and he fell in the end zone against Tampa Bay, one of those games, and he's seen 5 targets in every one of those games, which is the part where, because of Tariq Cohen not being there or not being healthy, is David Montgomery's taking his role. And ever since Tariq Cohen's gone down, David Montgomery's played over 80% of the snaps now. But against the Saints defense that's not giving up very many fantasy points and not giving up good rushers, and they don't allow receptions out of the backfield, it's definitely a tough matchup for David Montgomery this week. And I don't think, even if he does get 5 targets, there's a pretty low chance he's going to give you a high ceiling this week. Where I think my second guy, who's outside of the top 24, could give you a high ceiling, and I really like him this week, Damien Harris. Damien Harris is outside the top 24. Buffalo hasn't been good against the run this year. The last 5 games against the Rams, the Raiders, the Titans, the Chiefs, and the Jets. Against the Rams, Darrell Henderson, he had 120 carries for 114 yards and a rushing touchdown. Against Josh Jacobs, Jacobs had 15 for 48, which is the worst game that he had this year.
Yeah, but he's been pretty bad anyway.
His yards per carry has been awful this year. Derrick Henry's also actually had a really low yards per carry, but also he had 19 for 57 and 2 touchdowns. So they give up touchdowns. CEH had 26 carries for 161 yards against them, which was just because they're getting Le'Veon Bell, and then, this is his game where he gets to show out so that Le'Veon Bell can't take his spot or whatever. And then also against Frank Gore last week, they gave up 11 for 60, and Perine had 11 for 40 in the touchdown. The Bills run defense.
And that's Frank Gore.
That's Frank Gore. That's 48-year-old Frank Gore,
who averages 3 yards per carry for the last 6 seasons.
Correct. And he averaged 5.5.
Yeah, and just another thing, because I second both of Ben's picks right here. And so David Montgomery, another thing to think about is, so one of the big buzz things that Ben said was the amount of volume that he's been getting with Tariq Cohen gone, because he's getting RB1 touches. Like, he might be getting some of the most production in the entire NFL, or not production, volume in the entire NFL. But here's the issue. Another issue too, if Ben didn't sell you enough, then the other selling point is, so if you look how many runs David Montgomery has had over 15 yards, it's been 1. He's had 1. And because David Montgomery is not a big play back, And that really, really hurts him as a yards per carry guy, but also a production guy because, if you get 25 carries for even 5 yards, that's a good game, right? That's 125 yards rushing, but he doesn't do that. And for players to sustain 5 yards a carry, they have to have bigger runs because always you're still going to be game planned where they're only expecting you to get a couple yards. And so for all the runs that he has up the middle, he never breaks anything long on the outside. And so that really hurts David Montgomery. And I completely agree. I think this is a horrible matchup for him. New Orleans has a very, very good run defense. And they've just been shutting people down. On the flip side, I also really like your call on Damien Harris. I like Damien Harris this week. I think he's been pretty impressive with the limited amount of touches he's had this season. I think that New England stinks. And so they need to pretty much go with what they have good going for them. And I think that could be Damien Harris running.
Hopefully, Cam doesn't steal his goal line carry.
Well, and I think that's the biggest downfall is that we might have that concern. But also, if Damien Harris can get a 10-yard run in for a touchdown, that definitely helps. And he definitely has the playmaking ability to do that. Right. Well, and he's definitely a better, he's definitely a better goal line back than Singletary, but not than Cam. Just not than Cam Newton. Awesome. Yeah, so the guys that I picked, so the first one definitely hurts Ben's heart, but is DeAndre Swift. So Ben and I both really like DeAndre Swift as a player, and I think he has definitely shown a lot more in the last couple of weeks than he had been earlier. But I think Swift, he's playing the Colts. The Colts have a really strong defense all around. And I am really struggling to see this being a running game, mostly just because, the Colts are in the top 5 in both pass and rush defense. So I think with the Lions, if they're going to be struggling all over the board, that just leads to passing. And so I'm not seeing Swift getting a ton of work running the ball as it is, and not that he does, I guess, anyway. And then really, so if all of the work he's going to get is going to have to be in the air, I think that's just really hard for me to predict. And so I just don't trust it as much. So for me, that puts him definitely lower in the rankings than as an RB2. So I would definitely look at him as more an RB2 or a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 this week. So if you have another guy, I would maybe consider sitting Swift and going with someone else. And another guy that could be really good, and you probably would have gotten this guy on the waiver wire either this week, last week, or let's be real, is probably still available, is Lamichael Perine with the Jets. So the Jets have a great matchup with Kansas City because Kansas City, like I have been saying with other teams, has a terrible rush defense. They've given up an insane amount of yards this season to running backs. And really, it's because a big part of it is because their pass defense is really good. And they have been rushing the passer insanely well. So that leads to a lot more running the ball because they're losing a lot of yards getting sacked and their opposing quarterbacks throwing picks and all of these things, which after that's a long-winded way of saying that they've just not been great against the run. I think, Swift, there's several other things too, or not Swift. Oh my gosh. I'm talking about, I had something pulled up for Swift still, and I never even said it. But anyway, Lamichael Perine. But Perine has been getting a lot of work in the air. So that's one thing. And the Jets check down a lot. So, this could be one of those games where even if he sees 4 catches, in a half PPR league, that's a guaranteed 2 points and not even including the yards that he gets from those. And then plus just the extra carries that he'll get. And because of the split carries with him and Gore, I do think that opens the field a lot for him. And there is always the possibility that the Jets are down by a ton really fast and that they just don't even run anymore. But that also could lead to a lot more checkdowns to Perine just because of the pass rushing from Kansas City too. So, there's a lot of, I would say, like, outlook on this game, especially for Perine and honestly even Gore. Like, if you are struggling to fill a spot and you just see Gore hanging out there and he's an ugly play, like you really don't want to play Frank Gore pretty much ever. But if he's just hanging out and sitting there, he might be worth a look, especially against the Chiefs. So, I consider it. Perine's been out snapping Gore a ton too, so he definitely is the guy to go to. And because he's a rookie, I think. So because of his rookie status, I would definitely say he's not a bad guy for the Jets to try to get more work. But also, on the flip, trusting Adam Gase is always a really hard thing to do. So good luck with that. But anyway, those are my guys.
Those were good. I like them. All right. So for wide receivers, we're going to be doing the same thing as running backs, where we picked wide receiver 2, so 1 through 24, and then we're going to do outside the 24 for wide receivers. So my pick, I picked Mike Evans. Mike Evans is playing without Chris Godwin, and everybody's always like, well, whenever Chris Godwin's not playing, then Mike Evans always does really well. Not this week, because he's going up against probably the best shutdown corner that the Giants can offer, which is James Bradbury. And actually, he's been really good this year. And so, I mean, Brady didn't really target Mike Evans last week once Mike Evans wasn't really doing anything. And the week before that, Mike Evans had 1 catch for 10 yards. I still think he's a little banged up, and obviously that does hurt him. But I think that they're going to get up so far in this game that Mike Evans is just not going to be someone you're going to want to play, because there's going to be better options than playing Mike Evans when Tom Brady's not throwing him the ball. And so last week, Mike Evans only saw 4 targets, and he caught 2 balls for 35 yards. And it just didn't look like an offense that they needed, like that they were going to run. And then he went through Godwin and he went to Gronk. I think that even Leonard Fournette caught 6 balls last week. I mean, I just don't think that it's a Mike Evans kind of week this week, especially when he's being covered by a guy that's in the top 5 corners right now. And then my guy outside of the top 24 was in my bold prediction video. You should go watch that if you haven't yet. AJ Green is outside the top 24 in consensus. AJ Green was coming off of back-to-back really big games, and that's the opposite of Mike Evans, because Mike Evans has had back-to-back really bad games. And the Titans have actually been pretty good against the number 1 receiver because they put Malcolm Butler on him. And our number 1 outside receiver, they put Malcolm Butler on him. And we saw what that happened to Chase Claypool last week. And Green has experienced a lot in his 10 years, and I'm pretty sure that he could come off of a big week against Malcolm Butler. I'm pretty sure that, so the last 2 weeks, okay, AJ Green has on 13 and 11 targets, and he's the 10th leading target getter right now in the league. So he's getting volume. It's just he's not producing, but he will this week. And I had him ranked inside my top 24, but consensus did not have him ranked inside the top 24. Those are my picks.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
So just chugging along. So originally the guy I was going to fade was a different guy, but I'm changing who it is. So Same team. All right, so I just want to set the stage here. So this guy, it's really hard for me to recommend not starting him because he's been one of the best fantasy producing wide receivers in the entire NFL this year. But Adam Thielen is playing against the Packers. And that doesn't mean that much. I mean, the Packers have done a decent job across the board against receivers, especially from a fantasy producing standpoint. Although Randall Cobb ate them alive last week. I mean, not to the fault. The Packers still won, but whatever. But okay. So this is the stat that I care the most about. So since week 1, which was the Packers played the Vikings, Adam Thielen caught 6 balls for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. All right. So Jair Alexander, the cornerback for the Packers, shadowed him in that game. So he kind of made Jair Alexander look like a joke. However, since that game, Jair Alexander has allowed just 10 for 17 passing, okay, and 56 yards. No touchdowns. So Jair Alexander has been amazing since that game. Originally, I was going to pick Justin Jefferson for my fade, who I also, I don't know. I don't know if I would fade him as much anymore, but I think that whoever Jair Alexander is shadowing is not going to have a good game because he has been very good. So Justin Jefferson he's been running more routes out of the slot this year, which makes me feel like that Jair Alexander is going to be shadowing Thielen rather than Jefferson. So that's my guy that I'm going with. I still think that he's probably a start. It would be really hard not to. It's also possible the Vikings pass a lot in this game. So with those things in mind, I would fade Thielen. Like if you have two guys that are, borderline wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 1s, some teams have it. I have it on one in a couple leagues, but then maybe you could consider sitting Thielen, but you probably won't be. So maybe my advice is just pointless to you. But he's definitely someone that I would consider fading. But now a guy, okay, and maybe you wouldn't start this guy over Thielen. I maybe would. I would consider it. Is Cole Beasley, also known as the Bees. All right. When I said that, I'm sure there's people out there that shut this video off immediately. And they don't need my advice because they don't know what they have until it's gone. So here's the thing about Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley had 12 targets last week. That is very good. All right. He has had at least 6 targets in every single game this season. Okay. That's the first part. The second part is he runs every single route that he's on the field for out of the slot. The Patriots have been terrible against slot receivers this year. These are some of the players that they have had. Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Hunter Renfrow. 3 names. 2 of those guys, yeah, okay, they have name recognition. They're good guys. But those are Tyler Lockett went 7 for 67 and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill went 4 for 64 and a touchdown. And Hunter Renfrow went 6 for 84 and a touchdown. Hunter Renfrow had the best game of those 3 against the Patriots. So that's 3 of their 6 games, however many games. 6 games. 3 of their 6 games this year, they have given up a touchdown to the slot receivers as well as a lot of catches and yards. So in the first game against Beasley, when Beasley played in 2 games against the Patriots last season, he had 75 yards and 108 yards both times against the Patriots. I think that Beasley's going to have an awesome game this week. Not today. This weekend. And really, Jonathan Jones is the slot guy or the slot cornerback for the Patriots, and he's pretty bad. So I'm thinking Beasley's going to go off. And, if you want to start him over Adam Thielen, highly recommend. Definitely do it. Comment below. Tell me I'm stupid. That's fine because I'm right and you're definitely not. But yeah, start the Bees. He's my hero. I love that guy. Sadly, I don't own him on a single team, but that's all right. All right.
So for tight ends, we're going to be doing the quarterback one where we did 1 through 12 because most likely you're not starting 2 tight ends unless you have like George Kittle and Mark Andrews. I don't know why you do that. And maybe you wouldn't start Mark Andrews this week. Eric wouldn't start Mark Andrews this week. All right, so mine, I did TJ Hockenson. They're going up against the Colts. Colts give up the fewest points to tight ends. He's been great this season. I only think he should be outside the top 12 because he's going up against the Colts. Otherwise, I would still say play him. And he's got a really high chance of getting a touchdown because he is their red zone guy, him or Galladay. And, I don't know if they're ever going to get down to the goal line because the Colts defense is that good. But
very good.
They are very good. But they did give up a lot of points to the Bengals 2 weeks ago. But I don't like TJ Hockenson's matchup this week, so that's why I'm outside the top 12. But otherwise, TJ Hawkins is easily in the top 12. Eric's agreeing. My player that I decided that was outside the top 12 that should be in the top 12 easily is Dalton Schultz. I have him ranked 7th. They have him ranked 20th in consensus. Eagles are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends this year, and Dalton Schultz is getting more and more playing time every week. And so Siri just went off because she thought I said Siri. 1 second. Okay. More and more playing time this week. It will translate to targets. It's a for sure thing. At some point, it's going to translate to targets. Most targets you ever seen in the game is 10. And at some point, it's going to translate to targets. He's playing on over 80% of the snaps now. He's been seeing 4 targets per game on average. At some point, it'll go up. And I'm for sure it's this week against a defense that is not good against tight ends.
Nice. I know that was your bold prediction. All right.
And also, and you can watch my bold predictions for him as well.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah. No, I very much agree with Ben with Dalton Schultz. I think so I don't believe in Dallas literally at all. At all. You heard me say that last week. I'm saying it again. However, if Dalton Schultz is going to go off in a game for the rest of the season, this is probably that game because the Eagles are not good against tight ends. So
they're not.
Dalton Schultz is an athlete. He has great hands. I think that if he is going to do it, it will be today.
This weekend.
This weekend.
Not
You're
today.
right. It's not today. I keep saying that. All right. You ready for my guys?
I'm excited.
All right, so my number 1 big boy is Hunter Henry. I feel like that's all I have to say. Because let's be real. The Broncos have shut down the tight end position. Like, Hunter Henry has a very bad matchup. Like, terrible matchup. So if you have Hunter Henry, first of all, that's funny. But second of all, I hope you have another tight end because I would not start him. He has a terrible matchup. But overall, I mean, I think Denver just has a great pass defense in general, which definitely contributes to my not wanting to start Hunter Henry. But I think Keenan Allen has pretty much become a security blanket for Justin Herbert. Hunter Henry has definitely not had the same volume as he has had in past seasons. I think he's still working on that connection with Henry. I mean, he's still the athlete. He's still very good. But I would really consider putting the damper on Hunter Henry this week. And I do also want to mention Mark Andrews because you heard me talk about Lamar Jackson. You probably stopped watching this video when I said that because you're like, these guys are just idiots. But here's the thing. Mark Andrews also has a terrible matchup. The Steelers have the best pass protection, coverage linebackers in the entire NFL. Very strong. Yeah. Devin White, my boy.
Devin White?
Not Devin White.
Devin Bush is hurt, by the way.
Devin Bush, my boy, but he is hurt. Well, Devin Bush is a good coverage. He is a good coverage guy, but okay, so just forget that. Devin Bush isn't playing. Also, Devin Bush and Devin White are both short, so there's that too. There's
White's playing.
What?
I said Devin White's playing though.
Yeah, but we're not talking about Tampa Bay. Okay, anyway. Besides that, just forget everything I just said about that. But yeah, Mark Andrews, definitely someone I would fade. Obviously, if you have Mark Andrews, you're probably planning on starting him, but Baltimore is just a great defense. So I'd be worried about that. Anyway, my guy that I would consider starting, and this guy is probably on the waivers in most leagues right now, is Drew Sample. Okay. You might not even know who Drew Sample is. Drew Sample is the tight end for the Bengals. He is the one that has been playing ever since, what's his name? CJ Uzomah got hurt.
Yeah.
So Drew Sample is actually a very skilled tight end, very talented. I actually like him a lot. He's had a couple decent games, actually. I think he had one game with 9 targets. But he's also had some downers too. So he's definitely a boomer bust type play. But I think if you're really struggling for tight ends, I think Drew Sample is actually a really strong play this week. The Titans have been also bad against our tight ends this year. Similarly to the Eagles. I mean, the Titans defense has just kind of been below average in general. Ben hates their corners. So they got rid of but the Titans have given up a lot of points to tight ends this season. And actually, here, let me pull up the stat. It was a pretty good one. All right. So against tight ends this year, they have given up the second most fantasy points. All right. And this is in half PPR. And they gave up 17 week 1 to Noah Fant, 11.1 to Tyler Eifert in week 2, 8.1 to Kyle Rudolph, which, the one-handed catch monster. Dawson Knox, we don't need to talk about him. And then 17.5 points to Darren Fells, my boy. And then 8 points to Eric Ebron last week, which I'm sure Ben started and got those 8 points. So, okay, this is awkward. Anyway, not the point. But the point that is that Drew Sample is a pretty good outlook. If you take the average points against tight ends this year, they're averaging 8.6 points against the Titans. I don't think Drew Sample is going to change that. I think you can just plug him right into your lineup and you'll get a better return than you would from Mark Andrews. So let's see it happen. Also, don't put me on that.
Also, another tight end that was outside the top 12 that I kind of want to bring up is Jimmy Graham. Great play. New Orleans is the worst defense against the tight ends this year.
Yeah, I do want to say, too, if you have Jimmy Graham on your roster, you should be playing him every week. He's been actually really good with the Bears. Agreed. Nick Foles likes his tees.
True. All right, so now we're going to go to rankings. So Eric doesn't know any of the players that I am going to talk about or I'm going to bring up. And so this is going to be funny. So he doesn't have any notes at all.
Yeah, and if I don't seem hyper yet, just wait.
So, okay, so Matt Ryan.
Who?
We had Matt Ryan at 4. Did you know that? I have Matt Ryan at 12.
Oh, gosh. All right. So you want to know why?
I do want to know why, yeah.
All right. Surprise, surprise. Ben disagrees with me on something. Okay. Oh, and Matt Ryan's playing tonight. So today is Thursday night, by the way.
It is Thursday.
So we're 30 minutes before the game.
I was saying.
So Matt Ryan, all right, and this is just the worst because Ben's going to post this tomorrow morning and you will know the results and then I will just look stupid in the video. But that's good. No, I like it. That's like the best way to do it. That's good. That's called quality content. All right, so Matt Ryan has had in the last so in the 4 games with Julio Jones in the lineup this year, Matt Ryan has thrown 71% or completed 71% of his passes for 1,400 yards, which is 8.33 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That is good.
It's really good.
That is good fantasy production. All right. Now, Carolina has actually been deceptively good. So people are assuming I think there's like this misconception that Carolina's defense is just terrible this season, which they are against the run. They are not against the pass. And so okay, it doesn't matter. Just forget what I said. I just remember that I'm defending Matt Ryan's up high at 4, not going. See, I could give you a reason why not to have him at 4 too if you want. Okay. So okay.
The stats in the beginning were perfect. Why he's been great.
Right.
Julio's playing tonight.
Right, because Julio's playing tonight, and so when in the matchup against the Panthers last time, Matt Ryan didn't. That was one of his not great games, and Julio didn't play. I think that the Panthers. So and see, this does go with what I was saying because the Panthers have been good against the pass, but I also think that with Julio healthy, with Calvin Ridley healthy, with Russell Gage, with Hayden Hurst, with all these guys, there's so many options for Matt Ryan, and I think that he just has a huge upside in every game that Julio is on the field with him. And so should I have put him lower than 4? Probably. Did I know Ben was going to bring him up? Obviously not. So the problem here is I may have more defenses for lowering him than I do, and maybe I will lower him now. But I just think it feels weird. It feels dirty to put Matt Ryan as low as Ben did.
12?
So with Julio playing.
That's a starting QB.
Also, I do think, but I also think that I think that it actually might be a really high-scoring game tonight too, and that's another reason. Because the Panthers have been so bad against the run, even if Todd Gurley might go off, the Panthers might throw a ton, and this is going to be a huge scoring game. And I just really think that Matt Ryan has a potential to be a benefactor of that. And obviously, this video isn't going to help you start him. So if you did, you did. Great. And another thing. So this was a cool stat. So Matt Ryan in 11 Thursday night games, he has averaged 280 yards per game while throwing 21 touchdowns.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's not like amazing, but like that's slightly less than 2 touchdowns a game and 280 yards. So, I mean, that's pretty good. But I think he's going to have a huge game. And you will see that. Actually, you will know that watching this video right now that I was right and am right. So, all right, who's the next guy?
Carson Wentz. I had Carson Wentz at 4. You had him at 9.
Oh. I was thinking I had him at like 1 or something. Okay.
No.
That's not as bad.
I do really like his matchup this week.
All right, so yeah, you tell us why you like him.
Okay, well, I will tell you why. Okay, so Carson Wentz is going up against Dallas's defense. Dallas has been one of the worst defenses, and last week I had Carson Wentz ranked like 18th, and he goes off. So now when I rank him 4, now he's going to go and be like the worst quarterback in the league. That's how it's going to work. But I have him at 4 because I do like the matchup with the Cowboys, and I didn't want to rank him ahead of Lamar Jackson because I have Lamar Jackson at 3, if you didn't know that, which is the next guy we're going to talk about, by the way. So get yourself prepared. I have Lamar Jackson at 3, but I didn't want to rank Carson Wentz ahead of Lamar Jackson because although, did you know that Carson Wentz has 5 rushing touchdowns this year?
I do. Well, I put Carson Wentz at like 5 last week, didn't I? I had him like really high.
Oh, you had him at like 8.
Oh,
something like that. But yeah, it was still high.
Yeah, no, he's been awesome. I mean, he did have a rushing touchdown last week.
He's had 3 really good back-to-back weeks, or 3 really good weeks in a row. And they get Dallas this week.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. Honestly, I had him at 9 because.
Well, who do you have ranked behind him? Let's look.
Or ahead of him?
Yeah, ahead of him.
Derek Carr, Ryan Tannehill, Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. Which, now thinking about it, I maybe would have moved Matt Ryan down even below lower, but it doesn't matter. It's fine.
All right, you ready to? Sorry for the weird cut. We're going to start with running backs now. I have Myles Gaskins at 17, and you had him at 11.
Oh, yeah.
And so Gaskins, he's going up against the Rams this week. The Rams looked really good, but it was David Montgomery. What do you got to say about having him? Well, when I was ranking him, I was just thinking because there's a lot better running backs that are ahead of him, in my opinion, that have good matchups this week. But, I mean, I'm curious why you ranked him at 11.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so the Rams, I think are a pretty middle of the pack run defense. So for me, it was really just the share, like the opportunity share that Myles Gaskin has gotten. And just looking, I mean, he's like I just had it up. Yeah, so Gaskin is 5th in red zone touches. He's pretty, and he gets the ball thrown to him plenty. And I guess like definitely we will see probably a change with Tua under center. So that definitely is something to keep or take into consideration. But also really, I mean, top 5 of all running backs in receptions, top 5 in all running backs in red zone touches, and he's been getting plenty of opportunities. So really for me, I just saw the chance for him to have a big day, and especially because we don't know how Tua is going to be passing the ball. So I also was thinking,
check down to him.
So I was definitely just thinking about that kind of idea that Gaskin might get even more work just because of that. But also, if we look at receiving wise for running backs, Gaskin is he's probably one of the best receiving backs that have a workhorse role in the NFL. So, I mean, that's why I put him up at 11. And I think when I look at the guys that I have kind of in the same tier as him, I have Melvin Gordon, Darrell Henderson, Josh Jacobs, Boston Scott, and Giovanni Bernard. And I mean, two of those guys aren't even their team starting running backs, right? Because they with Boston Scott and Giovanni Bernard, and then Darrell Henderson being in a more of a committee, and then Melvin Gordon. I think the Chargers just have a pretty good run defense, and then Josh Jacobs just hasn't looked that great. So for me, it was not that hard of a choice to put Gaskin up to 11, and I also think that Gaskin is definitely a riser in general.
Yeah.
He's just looked really good in the past weeks, and I also think Miami is a pretty good team. So, I don't know.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
I think I just didn't like the matchup against the Rams, but you are right though that he is like their main guy there. And I mean, Brady hasn't really done anything, and neither has they kind of just took out Jordan Howard.
Yeah. Well, if it means anything, the Rams are the 18th best defense against the run. So really, that's not. I mean,
That's not like,
and it is one of those things because Gaskin actually has been pretty good with outside runs, and so that definitely is a thing where, like, I mean, if you try to stay away from running up the middle because of Aaron Donald, he's been pretty successful at that. So
it's a good point.
Yeah.
Next guy that I am curious because I had him ranked 11 and you had him ranked 19th. James Conner. You didn't like his matchup with Baltimore. And I like James Conner's matchup any week. I'm because you're ranking him at running back 2. I ranked him at running back 1, basically.
Right.
Like a low end running back 1, you ranked him as like a mid running back 2. And I don't know. I think he does have the value still of touches. Like he gets receiving. He gets his goal line carries taken away from him by Benny Snell or Chase Claypool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how sustainable that is, but yeah, he has gotten those taken away from him.
But you're right about Baltimore though. That is a tough run defense, and I mean, I still just trust James Conner. He's had a lot of good games where he hasn't even got a rushing touchdown. Where like last week, he had 12.6 points, and in half PPR, and he didn't get a touchdown last week, but he had 5 catches. I think he's valuable, more valuable than someone like Josh Jacobs or Boston Scott this week. Even that one's iffy though, because Boston Scott's going against Dallas, and Dallas has not been good against the run or pass catching backs. But
yeah, well,
you had Boston Scott ranked behind, or no, I had him ranked behind James Conner. You had him ranked far ahead of James Conner.
Yeah. Well, so this is, I mean, so definitely my biggest reason for putting him down to 19 was because of the Ravens defense. But I mean, so the Ravens are allowing the least amount of fantasy points to running backs in the entire NFL. So there's that part. But then, so 9.17 fantasy points per game.
Really good.
Yeah, and that's 55 points on the season. And so here's some stats. So the Ravens are allowing 4.34 yards per carry, which is not that great for the Ravens. So I mean, 4.34 yards per carry is actually a pretty good number for James Conner. But then they've only allowed 5.13 yards per target to running backs in the NFL. So that's also a good number in favor of the Ravens. I think really my biggest thing, and I think so they're the best run defense at the goal line. And I don't know. They've just been really good. But so with that being said,
it's because they're so far ahead in their games that the teams don't run on them?
Well, yeah. No, I think that's definitely possible. But I also think what's hard, though, is I don't know if that's going to be different this week.
You think they're going to beat the Steelers pretty bad?
No. I don't think that's true. I think that there is a possibility that they'll be. I think it's possible that this is going to be a pretty close game overall. I think it's going to be a very defensive forward game. And so
I
for
agree.
me, that makes it hard to see James Conner getting. I mean, because even if he gets 15 carries, I just don't think that he's going to produce with those touches. And so for me, what it is that I really struggle to see James Conner producing as a top 12 running back. That's really what it is. Like I'm not saying that his floor isn't there, but it's the ceiling part that I have all of these guys that have better ceilings because
Yeah,
so many
okay.
of these guys have really good matchups. Like you said, Boston Scott, Giovanni Bernard has a really good matchup. Ronald Jones has a good matchup. Justin Jackson doesn't really have a good matchup, but Darrell Henderson, Jonathan Taylor,
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good matchup.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, Kareem Hunt, Dalvin Cook. I mean, obviously those guys are the top, but I think that's where it is. And then for me, even like if I'm comparing like him to like Ezekiel Elliott, well, Elliott has not looked good, but his ceiling is definitely higher than any running back playing the Baltimore Ravens defense.
I agree.
So
That's
that's
fair.
really where I'm at.
That's a good point.
And then also just in general, I mean, James Conner has been one of the worst producing fantasy point running backs. So, like, for his workload. So, like, yes, he is definitely the workhorse running back in this offense, and he gets a ton of opportunity, but he has not produced fantasy point wise for the opportunity he's gotten. And he's down there along with like Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon.
So it's like a David Montgomery.
And David Montgomery. So it's one of those situations for me where I do struggle with that. I do think, I mean, even with Benny Snell and Chase Claypool sniping his red zone touches, like he still is up there in those touches too. So I mean, I guess that is an upside. But also, I feel like he hasn't been thrown to nearly as much this year
No,
as
I
in
agree.
past years. So I think that is definitely like I think now that we've seen 6 weeks into the season for them, I think now we can actually say with confidence that he's being targeted less.
No, I agree.
And against Baltimore, I mean that worries me. Like it just makes it really hard for me to see him producing as a RB1 for this week.
That's fair. The last guy for the running backs, I had Justin Jackson ranked 25th, and you had him ranked 18th. I don't like that matchup against Denver.
Yeah.
Well, and he didn't really do that well last week or 2 weeks ago last week when they played. When he's
Yeah, I
landing
mean,
on the goal line.
well, last week he was coming off injury. I mean, wasn't he
No, you're
hurt last
right.
week?
He played, but he was
Oh,
hurt.
he did. Yeah, but he was coming off injury. Yeah, he had 5 carries.
Yeah,
Uh,
he just didn't play.
oh, I guess he had 5. He did have 5 catches.
Yeah.
He actually produced. I mean, he had 10.5 points last week. Yeah. So okay. So actually, that probably helped. That what I just said kind of helps why I put Justin Jackson where I did. So I think Justin Jackson definitely has that role, and because of his past, like his passing work that he's getting, I think that's where his upside's coming from. So putting him at 18, which for the listener, that's one spot above James Conner for me. And I do completely like. I think Denver has a very stout run defense, and so definitely good. And I think Josh Kelly is definitely a concern for me. But because Kelly doesn't even see the field on passing downs, I just think that the ceiling for Justin Jackson is just so high. And I even think like Justin Jackson, I think could pretty easily any given week that he's playing could be a 20-point scorer in fantasy. And it's just because of his receiving upside. And I think in that first game that he played against New Orleans, like I just thought he looked really good.
That's fair.
And he had 15 carries, 5 receptions, so 20 touches in a game. And I don't think Denver has a good defense, but I wouldn't also say that it's not like he's playing Baltimore.
No, that's fair.
So,
well, but I don't know if he's a better runner than Conner, but Baltimore is tough.
Well, right. I mean, he's not a better runner than Conner. He might be a better receiver.
Oh, I think for sure.
But
You
yeah.
want to talk about receivers now?
Sure.
So Diontae Johnson, I had him at 28, and you had him at 16.
Yeah.
You're just talking about Baltimore's defense.
I know. Yeah. So this might be a little too high on Diontae Johnson. So part of it for me is, I'm definitely a believer. I think that the Steelers have a ton of options, and so Diontae Johnson has been targeted an insane amount, um, for just in games that he's played. So in games that he's played the full game, he's been targeted 10, 13, and 15 times. And that's against the Giants, the Broncos, and the Titans defenses. So the only defense for passing in the top 10 in that list is Denver. So, that is definitely something to think about. But I don't know. There's something. Diontae Johnson is a different guy this year, and I just feel like he's just really producing. In week 2 against Denver, which was the best pass defense he played this season, and I'll repeat that. That was also his best fantasy day because he had 8 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown.
Smaller than last week because he had 2 touchdowns.
But sorry, I'm saying his best production wise, not fantasy points, because you're right, fantasy was better last week. But and so that to me has the look of I think that he might not have problems with Baltimore. And if you think of Baltimore's you can.
Baltimore's outside corners are not as good as their slot corners. And so like Peters and Smith are definitely guys to target. And they've given up some big plays this year, and Diontae Johnson is definitely a big play guy. I think this is like a bad juju week.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's going to have Marlon Humphrey.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I rated Juju at 60th, 50th. Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And I think that's a huge reason I put Diontae Johnson where I did. See, and really, Jimmy Smith will probably be the one covering him, I would think. Probably. And like realistically, he's a good corner.
Well, he's just getting up there in age, and he's not the fastest guy.
Right. And he's been pretty good against corners this season. But again, what you were saying is we could also attribute that to just how good Baltimore's defense has been. I don't think it is a great matchup realistically, but I also think so. Johnson's target share if we're only counting the 3 games that he played the full games in, he has a 31.3% target share, which is super. That's like top 5 in the NFL. And
pretty sure Keenan Allen's leading with 35% target share.
Yeah, no, that's insane. So, okay, but this is another thing too, because I think this might be very similar to the Allen Robinson kind of argument from last week, where Robinson was being covered by
Ramsey. Yeah.
But I had Robinson at 18 and I have Diontae Johnson at 16, but I put, Ben Roethlisberger as your quarterback is significantly better. And granted, Baltimore does have a better defense than the Rams, but I really do think that that Johnson has been underrated this season, and I think that he belongs in the top 20 at least, regardless of the matchup. So I don't know, and really that is another thing too, because Chase Claypool, I guess because what you're saying is like, Peters is going to be.
Well, he's going to be on
right. And I guess it is possible that it could be Diontae Johnson, but I'm expecting it to be on
size Claypool. Matchup. It would definitely be better that he would be covering Diontae, because Claypool is 6'4" and Jimmy Smith 6'2".
Yeah.
Peters is smaller.
Yeah, but I
think for speed though, I think
there's a possibility though that they would worry that Claypool would just eat Jimmy Smith alive.
No, I agree. The next wide receiver is Darius Slayton. you had him ranked 30th, and I didn't have him ranked, and I was like thinking about it, and I was like, I don't like him against Tampa this week, so I probably would have rated him in like the 38 range if I ranked all the way down there.
Yeah.
I don't like his matchup against Tampa, and I don't like how Daniel Jones is throwing the ball. I think I would rather have Shepard in this week over Slayton if it was me.
Yeah, and really, like, I kind of just threw Slayton in there a
Yeah.
little bit. I think so. Okay, I do think that Sterling Shepard could be a better play and maybe should be in that spot over Slayton, because realistically, Shepard is the number one receiver for the Giants. The Buccaneers obviously have had an insanely good defense this season, pretty much tearing apart every single quarterback that they've faced. But also the Buccaneers are allowing one of the most, or their defense has had some of the most balls thrown against them. So they're averaging, or teams against them are averaging 64.1% of the time are throwing, which is the fourth most in the NFL. So teams are throwing against the Buccaneers
A lot,
significantly more than they are other teams.
Mhm.
I do think Daniel Jones is bad, and I think that he's terrible under pressure, and I think the Buccaneers are going to give him a ton of pressure, which does make Shepard a valuable play because of the checking down. But I also think that Slayton's like super talented, and
I agree.
having him at 30, I mean, you could argue that I mean, I think a lot of teams are going to have two receivers higher than that, but it is possible that he is your second guy, especially with the buys and the injuries. So I think he's I think because of the boom factor, that's why I have him at 30 more than anything.
No, that's
Let's
fair.
see, the Buccaneers have allowed 4 pass plays to go for over 40 yards this season, which is 8th most in the NFL. So, I mean, I don't know if that really means anything, but that's also Slayton's bread and butter.
I mean, we watched Justin Herbert when they played against them threw like 2 passing touchdowns over the top of their heads when they
Right.
played the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and yeah. Yeah, and so maybe the Slayton play is definitely more about Daniel Jones than it is.
Would you say Slayton is like Diontae Johnson?
What?
Would you say Slayton and Diontae Johnson are pretty similar players?
I mean, I think Diontae Johnson is much more of a possession guy than Slayton.
Okay. You want to go on the tight ends?
Sure.
All right. Noah Fant. I had him at 9. You had him at 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that for me was the matchup. I mean, Tennessee. Oh, not Tennessee. The Chargers. The Chargers are very much middle of the pack, but also I think Fant is probably is the most healthy. Like, I mean, last week he just wasn't fully healthy, and I think he didn't play. Oh, I guess he played 68% of the available snaps. And he was targeted 7 times. Yeah, I think he's the number 1 receiver on on the Broncos, and especially I don't know, his connection with Drew Lock is something that I think we have to think about. Obviously without Cortland Sutton, that kind of puts him in that role. But Fant, I mean, I think it is insane to say that he is a mismatch no matter what. Like and because that's even when we think about Darren Waller as being a mismatch, like Noah Fant is more athletic than Darren Waller. Like Noah Fant is probably the most athletic tight end in the NFL.
I don't know.
And so I don't know. I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, for me, if Drew Lock is going to throw 7 times to him minimum, because currently Noah Fant has had 6, 5, 10, 6, 7 targets, which, I mean, if you look at, I think what was his target? Yeah, his target share, he's 8th in all tight ends, and that's including the one game that he didn't play.
Yeah.
Or 2 games? 1 game?
2, I think. No, they had a canceled game. against the Patriots.
Yeah, 5 and 6. Yeah, you're right. So, because he was hurt for one of those. Well, I think he got hurt.
He got hurt.
Yeah, I think he got hurt against the Jets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that game he only played 50% of the snaps. But yeah, it is definitely a Noah Fant talent thing for me, and I think that just another week just adds him to the slate. And honestly, and Ben and I have both kind of mentioned this already, but I think there's a lot of rough tight end matchups this week, especially for the top guys. Like I had mentioned Mark Andrews and I had mentioned Hunter Henry. And that really, like, those are the two guys that I pretty much put Fant above. And then Jimmy Graham I had at 6, which he, like we were saying in expert consensus, he's like I think 12th or 13th. So, I mean, for me, it's just putting Noah Fant above those guys. TJ Hockenson has a horrible matchup because the Colts have are really good against tight ends. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much why I just think Fant's matchup is more favorable than a bunch of the other tight ends this week.
All right, and then the last player I'm going to ask you about is Gronk. You rated him 10. I rated him 6. They're going up against the Giants. I rated him 6 because Gronk's coming off of back-to-back big weeks, and I really think that he could do that again this week. And without Chris Godwin playing, I think he's got a better chance even than doing it again. Why do you think you ranked him at 10? Matchup?
Well, I think so. This is definitely one of those things that this guy could just be completely wrong about this because Gronk might actually be back to being Gronk. Obviously an older Gronk, but still back to being Gronk because, yeah, he's looked very good the last 2 weeks. No, and for me, it really is like the Giants are let's see.
Good against
they're 7th against tight ends this season. So, I mean, that's really probably why I put him there. I guess like in my mind, I didn't consider that being that low, but I suppose what you're saying, that is definitely lower. I would say I definitely think because in the average 10 to 12 team league, realistically, he should be rostered. And realistically, he probably should be starting on a team this week across the league. And I think there is like some validity to the fact that Chris Godwin is out. So that definitely helps give him more targets. But yeah, I don't know. So like some stats about it, like the Giants have only one tight end has caught more than 4 balls against them, which that definitely, Gronk is definitely a touchdown guy, but I think that is going to hurt any tight ends upside with the fact that, catching 4 or less balls makes it really hard to actually produce. And we even saw it, I don't know. Why do you have him up at 6?
Just because I didn't think that any other tight ends, I didn't think that Noah Fant is gonna have like as great of a matchup because it's supposed to be snowing. Did you know that? In their game in Denver?
I did read that, but I don't. Usually I don't like care that much about that, but I guess it does matter because it mattered last week.
I don't like Hockenson's matchup, so I ranked Hockenson down. I don't like Hunter Henry's matchup. Jimmy Graham, I had him at 10, which me and you just flipped Jimmy Graham and Gronk, basically. I think just Gronk's matchup is worse than Jimmy Graham's, obviously, but what I've been hearing is that the rookie tight end, Komet, he's like
Bears
stepping up in his role. And they think, and Nagy really likes him because he's been catching passes.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to lower Jimmy Graham's role going forward. Maybe not this week, but I didn't like how Jimmy Graham got out yards last week. He didn't have the most yards on his team out of tight ends.
Well, yeah, but Kmet had that one like
Yeah, I know. You're right.
30-yard catch.
But I still don't like how well because yeah, and Komet was their second leading receiver last week in yards. And you're right, he did have that 30-yard catch. I think it was like 35.
Yeah,
I'm
when he
just
only
like,
had 2 catches, didn't he? Two
yeah,
catches for 40 yards or whatever.
yeah, 2 for 45. I don't know. Maybe I probably would move Gronk down a little bit and move Jimmy Graham up, but I mean, I just liked how Gronk's been playing the last couple weeks.
Yeah, see, and for me, putting Jimmy Graham above that, it's really, New Orleans has not been great against tight ends. And
Worse. Yeah.
Jimmy Graham, I mean, and Jimmy Graham doesn't have the same target. Like he has a higher target share than Gronk, which Gronk obviously has only actually been involved in the offense for like 2 weeks. So really that is probably not accurate. Like Gronk probably does have a higher target share. But also like Jimmy Graham, with that being said, like so to say Kemet is gonna like dig into Graham's targets, I think is hard for me because Graham is only ranked 15th of tight ends. So it's not like he's getting like these insane targets or anything. Like he's pretty like average at best. But really for me, Graham, it's all about his touchdown upside. I mean, he has 4 touchdowns, which realistically, like that doesn't, I guess, decide if that doesn't really mean much for like this next game. But really, what that means is he's just getting a lot of touchdown targets.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
And he's leading. I mean, he is leading all tight ends in red zone targets with 11.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and he has 7 catches in the red zone, which is also, or second of tight ends. So I don't. Yeah, I think that's really where I'm at with it in comparison to Gronk. Like Gronk, I still like. 2 weeks should be enough, but I feel like I still need another week to prove it. And just with Graham's favorable matchup for me.
Well, and yeah, I was just thinking because I like re-edited my stuff when I heard that Chris Godwin was out on Tuesday. And
Yeah.
that's when I moved Gronk up to 6 because I think his targets are going to go up even more. Does that make sense? And so, I mean, maybe it'll be Scotty Miller will be getting more targets. Like last week, Scotty Miller only had like 3 targets.
Yeah, but he had that touchdown.
Yeah, but he had that like 50-yard touchdown. But outside of that, though, Gronk had the second most targets on the team behind Godwin.
Right. Yeah.
And he caught 5 balls for like 60 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Back-to-back weeks of that though too.
No, I hear what you're saying.
So what are the Packers ranked against tight ends?
I
don't have it up.
No, I didn't. Let's see. Against tight ends. Let's see. Packers are actually really good against tight ends.
I mean, Gronk
They're 5th
for 62 and touchdown against the Packers. That was my point, though. Was that like Gronk has, because I think Brady likes Gronk, and he's proven that throughout his career that he likes.
Well, yeah.
And I think Gronk's finally turning back into like what you're saying, like into the Gronk form, the old Gronk form.
Mm-hmm.
Like older version, not like the old 2011, 17 touchdown guy.
Right.
But like he's getting back into NFL shape, I would say. And I think I ranked him out of Jimmy Graham because Jimmy Graham won't get receiving yards, but I know Gronk will. And also Gronk could get a touchdown on top of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And like what I was saying is for me, when I compare those two things, that's where I take into account the matchup.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Where like Brady, well, because then I think that's the thing too, is Brady has a great matchup as the quarterback. Yeah. But I think that if Gronk is covered well, and then Mike Evans and Scotty Miller aren't, and Tyler Johnson, I guess. I mean, that immediately puts that's going to just give Brady the opportunity to throw to those guys rather than Gronk.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think this I mean that could go back and forth all day though. Really, like we're comparing 2 touchdown upside guys that, I mean, both have touchdown upside. So
yeah,
they're both going to be, they both have the potential to get those targets, and one just is leading the tight ends in targets and has an easier matchup. The other one is probably going to get targeted more overall, which gives them, the higher target share, which gives them the better chance of also catching a touchdown.
Yeah.
So.
All right. That was good. All right. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and ring the bell when you subscribe so you get the post notifications. This is Eric. I think you're on this side. Maybe this side. You guys will see him again next week. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.